Good morning, Paul. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Arrow, how are you? Thanks for having me on. Sure.
I got to thank you for putting this book out because I'll bet you if you went to most millennials or Generation Z, they would have no idea what you're talking about. And we need journalism like this to grow our future forward.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's interesting that, this happened 60 years ago,
Yes.
Kennedy assassination. It's really ancient history for folks, so they really don't know that much about it. It's sort of like, World War II or World War I for, others. It's just something that happened a long time ago. And, a lot of young folks today, they get their information on TikTok and Instagram and that kind of thing. And, say what you will about that, but, it may or may not be as truthful, shall we say, and, in delivering facts and stuff. So that's one reason why I wrote this. I think the history of the assassination needed kind of an updating. So here we are.
And the thing is that these days, especially with AIs, they're rewriting the history. That's why it's so important that people pay attention to what you put in Countdown to Dallas, because this is authentic. This is what happened.
Well, artificial intelligence is really changing, everything. We hear about ChatGPT and all of that. And, with technology in general, there are pluses and minuses. It can do both good or bad. I suppose it depends on the intent of the user. But, facts are facts. And, we live in this age of disinformation where it's easy to manufacture fake videos, fake audio, this kind of thing. So we've really got to be careful about, what we publish and write. We've got to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. And boy, it's really tough. But that's another reason why I wrote this book and why I try and do what I do. I think it's just important to be truthful about facts and just tell stories as best you can.
I'm the type of person that believes in dots as well as breadcrumbs. And the way that you connect all of these dots to create a line is mind-blowing to me, because it's almost like this was supposed to happen. Everything led to that moment.
Well, I think it did, and I think the connecting the dots is really, key. I mean, there are a lot of people who think that, it's kind of fishy how Oswald got his job in the book depository. They think it's kind of fishy that Kennedy drove by the depository just 5 weeks later. They think all of these things are fishy. You can take any of those things and break them down bit by bit and realize, you know what? These things aren't fishy. They're just, as the title says, it's just a bad blind luck that these things happen. So that's sort of the way it is.
I mean, he got that job 5 weeks before the presidential parade went by that building. Were they talking about it, that Kennedy would be taking this route? Because nowadays, even when the president comes to Charlotte, we don't know what way they're going to take from the airport to the location.
Well, that's right. There's a chapter in the book called A Different Era, and that's exactly what it was. No, when Oswald got that job, and there's a whole explanation as to how he got it, in mid-October 63, Kennedy's visit to Texas had not been finalized. Wow. They wanted to visit, the four big cities. He wanted to go to Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, but the order hadn't been finalized. None of that. Originally, there was going to be a breakfast in Dallas. It was changed to a luncheon, on and on and on. Now, none of this fell into place before Oswald got his job. So that's kind of silly. And the other thing that people don't realize is that the motorcade route that took Kennedy past the book depository where Oswald worked, guess who approved that motorcade route? It was a guy named Kenneth O'Donnell, who is Kennedy's top White House aide. Yeah. He said, no, that's the route we'll take because we're going to this place called the Trade Mart for this luncheon speech. So this is where the motorcade route will go. So if you think there was a conspiracy and the motorcade route was fixed, well, then you must be saying that Kennedy's own top White House aide was in on it. It's just silly. Mm-hmm. And the story about how Oswald got his job in the depository, I break all that down too. There was he was unemployed. He lost several menial jobs that year. He could not hold even the simplest job. He did not have a lot of money. His wife just had a second child, and they were estranged, by the way. She was living in suburban Irving. Dallas suburb. And one day there was some of these suburban women were having coffee, and the fact that Lee needed a job came up. And one of the women said, "Hey, my brother just got a job at this place called the Texas School Book Depository. I bet they could use another man." Well, it turns out that they could. Oswald goes down there, interviews, lies on his application. The application is in my book. Said he was just out of the Marines, lie after lie after lie. He gets the job, again, weeks before the Texas trip was even finalized. And the other thing about this, Arrow, is that people don't realize that the book depository actually had 2 locations in Dallas. And the guy who ran the book depository, guy by the name of Roy Truly, nearly assigned Oswald to the other location, which was nowhere near Dealey Plaza. It was only then when he decided, well, we've got more work downtown, I'll put Oswald there. So if you think there's a conspiracy that all these women at the Suburban Coffee and Roy Truly, that all of these people would have to be in on it, it's just silly. You know, one rule of a conspiracy, Arrow, is that the fewer people who know about it, the better. So if you're suggesting that Oswald's job was, kind of fixed, well, what about all these people who were kind of in on helping him get it? It just does not add up.
Yeah. Would you say the assassination is one of the 7 mysteries of the world?
Well, I don't really think. I think it's one of the 7 tragedies of the world. I think the thing that boggles people the most, and it boggles me after all this time, is that people. And this is one thing I think that really fuels conspiracists, Arrow, is that people have a hard time grasping that a nothing like Oswald, just this guy who couldn't hold a simple job, was a failure in every sense of the word, that somebody like that could just, in the blink of an eye, erase the most powerful man in the world, just wipe him off the face of the earth in just 6 seconds. It was so quick, so casual, so easy. It just boggles the mind. And I think that's what people have trouble grasping. It's amazing even to me, but all conclusive evidence after all this time continues to point to that.
Do you believe that there was a second person? Because, I mean, you're right. This guy had the perfect shot, the perfect everything. And it's like, wow, how is this possible?
There's no evidence of a second gunman. Some people have a hard time believing that. They scour photographs looking at various shadows and everything. The only gun seen that day was in the 6th floor window, and several people saw it. Not just several people. Of the people who were there were 3 people on the 5th floor directly beneath Oswald who were watching the parade. They heard the shell casings bouncing on the floor above them. This is an old warehouse. Dust and plaster fell down on their heads from above. The noise was overwhelming, and they said somebody's shooting right above our heads. No other person with a gun was seen. You can look at all the shadows and photographs, and people to this day, there are Facebook pages devoted to studying the imagery and all of that. You can go down all of these rabbit holes. But again, 6 decades, Arrow, and the key word here is conclusive. There's no conclusive evidence that there was a second gunman. No conclusive evidence.
Is there any information the CIA or the FBI is still hiding from the rest of us, or has it all been unveiled?
Well, one reason why I wrote this book to freshen it up is because after the 50th anniversary, there's a whole bunch of books and TV shows on the 50th anniversary, right? Well, in the 10 years since, there have been about 55,000 pages government documents that have been released. A lot of them were CIA documents. A lot of them were FBI documents. But there are still some pages that have not been released. And the conspiracists point to that and say, aha, they're still covering up. And we don't know what's in those pages, but 99% of the stuff has been released. But that being said, in this book, I talked to, I want to cover both sides here. So I talked to people who still believe in a conspiracy theory, people who believe that Oswald alone did it. There's no one among the people that I spoke with who said, look, the new documents really move the needle in either direction. Again, there's no conclusive evidence here. CIA was absolutely watching Oswald because this was a defector to the Soviet Union. The
Yep,
guy gets out
yep.
of the guy gets out of the Marines, defects to the Soviet Union, and then he comes back. I mean, that's what you might call fishy. So of course he was being watched overseas, and when he came back to this country, the FBI was also watching him. They actually spoke with him a couple of times, spoke with Marina, his wife, a couple of times, and then at one point, the file was closed because they realized, look, this guy's kind of crazy, but never made a threat to anybody. They weren't aware that he was a violent person. This is the height of the Cold War. They had other cases to, worry about. So they closed the file. What's interesting also is kind of funny that, when he was in the Soviet Union, the KGB thought he was a CIA guy, and when he was back in this country, the CIA thought he was a KGB guy. So neither side trusted the other and thought he was working for the other side. It's all just kind of Cold War craziness.
Yeah. With it as tragic as it was and still is today, should we have compassion for someone like Lee Harvey Oswald? Is there something in our hearts that we should be saying, hey, look, yes, it was bad, but he was human?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good. I just want to know where your heart was.
No, I don't think so. I think that he was a pathetic figure who wormed his way into the pages of history with one of the most tragic crimes in American history. I don't think anyone should feel anything for him other than just what I explained. He was a terrible, pathetic figure.
To go into the research, is it like the needle in the haystack?
Well, you can go down into any number of rabbit holes when investigating something, like this. One thing leads to another, and then to go off in another direction. There are people who've spent a lifetime, following this. I mean, decades. It's just kind of ridiculous. I just decided to look. You mentioned connecting the dots earlier. I thought, look. I'm going to go back to Oswald's very beginning. I'm going to track every place he ever lived, every job he ever had, every relationship he ever had. What happened to those jobs? How did he make his money? Things that we can actually, prove. Banking records, real estate records, even, the books he checked out of the New Orleans library, which are very interesting too. Everything that is revealing about him. And I put all of that together to kind of paint a picture as to who this guy really was. And to come back to your earlier question, I think the bottom line is there's nothing to kind of move my opinion away from the fact that this was just kind of a nothing kind of a figure who didn't amount to much. He thought he was destined for greatness. He told Marina at one point, his wife, I'm going to be a prime minister of America in 20 years, not realizing, of course, that we don't have a prime minister here. But that's sort of, poorly educated, but he had these dreams of glory and fame. And he talked about doing something that would make him famous for the next 10,000 years. And I guess he did. Wow.
You have an eye-opening moment in my heart in this book. It's where you describe that one man's favorite shows and the opera can define his personality. All of a sudden, I turn the camera on me going, okay, what am I watching that somebody's going to say, I knew what he was as a personality? It's that we learn a lot about ourselves inside these pages, sir.
Well, I suppose we do. I mean, you're talking about his favorite TV show was on in the early 50s called I Led Three Lives. And it was about an FBI guy who was a double agent, or was he a triple agent? And was he working for the government, or was he not working for the government? And every week there were, different, espionage capers and, daring do. And, it was just an incredible show, apparently. And he watched that show religiously. And his older brother, Robert, said even when he was home on leave from the Marines, he would watch the reruns. He loved that show, and he apparently was fascinated by he liked the action it portrayed and the shadowy intrigue and all of that. He just seemed to love that stuff.
Where can people go to find out more information about you? I want people to know about you because I love your passion and your drive to get to the center of the story. You call it, with the research, I call it defragging. You like to go in there and really break it down, because there is a story there.
Well, it's really true. I mean, you can't take a big topic like this and, can't make sweeping judgments. I think you got to get into the weeds and see what's really there. And I tried to, do that. I guess you could follow me on Twitter. I have an account called West Wing Report. So I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be, but I'm still on there. I write a finance column for Dow Jones, Market Watch, and, and the books you can find on Amazon. I'm also the podcast host, by the way, Evergreen Streaming. I have actually a series on disinformation that I host, which is talk about a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
So you can find me in all kinds of places, I think, but mostly you can find me on your show, hopefully.
Yeah, there's no hopefully. You are. But I do have a couple seconds to ask this question because I really want to know how you feel about this. Being a former Moscow-based correspondent, this has got to affect you, the way that the world has changed the way that it has over the past year and a half.
Well, it's really tragic to see the Russians kind of taking a step backward. I was there when the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, and for 30 years they had a chance to kind of integrate with the rest of the world, and they've chosen now not to do that. So it's been this massive regression. It's too bad for them.
Yeah,
it's just it's more tragic for the people of Ukraine, of course, but it's sad to see the Russians kind of, take this step back. They're just going in the wrong direction.
Wow.
It's awful.
Paul, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'd love to come back.
You bet. You be brilliant today, okay, sir?
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Errol.